Ingram Smith, Bud Elliott, back again for another episode of the Nolecast. All right, Bud. So had a little bye week period to regroup, revamp, look at, revisit some of the tape that's associated with a 0-2 team, and give you an idea as to maybe what we think is here, what we can. We'll have obviously we'll have our own Memphis preview and things coming up throughout this week, but give you as good of an idea as we can as to how this team and program got to 0-2 and what the rest of the year will look like. As always, want to thank our sponsors. We'll start off by thanking our good friends at Charlie Park. Charlie Park up there by the AC Hotel up over by Cascade Park. Fantastic restaurant and rooftop bar there, charlieparkrooftopbar.com, and would certainly encourage you making reservations on any kind of game weekend.
Absolutely, man. So went back and watched it. Obviously, the instant reaction was not fun to do, but we have done we've certainly done more depressing ones than that, and the program has also bounced back. And I am not going to sit here and lie to you guys or just give an opinion I don't really hold that it's going to bounce back immediately and everything will be just totally fine, right? Every year is a new year unto itself, but there are things I liked and there are things I didn't like in that ball game. And I don't want to spend too much time on the BC review, but I will say there are certain guys that I would bet on to bounce back who played poorly in this game in an uncharacteristic fashion. A couple of them who I think are guys that the staff likes, like they're not pain in the butts to deal with, okay, who have good practice habits and are traditionally pretty good players for you. Darius Washington, who graded terribly by PFF and got his butt kicked. Okay. Guys can have an off night. You lost this Boston College game for a couple reasons. I don't think you coached very well. And some of your better, more dependable guys played poorly. So Washington was one. Toe Philly, who was open on a couple of those throws, and several of those were actually like decent, some of the very few decent throws that DJU made. I just had some drops, man. Morlock is not a guy that I think you can depend on to be a real impact guy. But I generally think you can depend on him to not play like that. Like that was pretty depressing. So you're talking about in a game in which you had very few plays, those were like 7 plays as far as pass plays to Morlock and to Toafili that you get nothing out of that cost you first downs that make you punt the ball back to Boston College pretty quickly. I do think you would see some. I was texting with Sonone about this today. Knowles 24/7, who, by the way, I thought wrote a very fair and good article. Everybody should go read over the weekend. And we were talking about like positive regression to the mean. Okay. I don't really have any reason to think that is FSU's true talent level or true ability level. And I talked about this on the instant. The line for the game this weekend came out at like 2 or 1.5 or something. And I was like, that's just wrong. Okay. Either Florida State totally quits on the season and then the line should be like Memphis 10, or it should be like Florida State over a touchdown, which it currently is as we sit here tonight. Like
north of it was. I looked at it today. It was 7. Is it north of that?
It's like 7.5.
7.5. Okay.
Which makes a little more sense. Like you did just play Georgia Tech down to the wire, right? Like you have shown the ability to play not great football, but like not awful football. Like the Georgia Tech game was okay. You know what? You are probably not one of the top 10 teams in the country level play. And you didn't play all that great. Georgia Tech played a pretty damn good game. You made some pretty costly mental errors. Some of the angles you took were poor, and tackling could be better. The Boston College game was rather depressing. But like a couple guys like that, I thought Fuller's comments today echoed sort of what we said on the instant, which is like a lot of the D line didn't play that poorly. There are other spots in that defense that need to step up. Which I agree. I mean, clearly like backers and safeties and even some of the corners. It was an off night that had followed a couple of poor practices in a row. And that's kind of why we were like, look, man, we got to see if some of these guys, how much they want it, how much they care, and like who's going to step up as a leader, which Norvell alluded to in the post game.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what you said there, like, I literally had people who are employed by NFL teams reach out to me and ask me about Lawrence Toafili after the Tech game and some of the plays that he made and some of the plays that he's made throughout his career as far as catching the ball. Guy's a very dependable, hardworking guy that's been a really good Seminole throughout his career and has given us some pretty spectacular moments, whether it be the touchdown against Clemson or some of the other moments that he's had in his career. So I've had, as you can imagine, Bud, over the last 5 days, I've had I don't know how many former players and friends and contacts in media, national media, other large teams reach out to me and ask me like, hey, like, behind the scenes, what's going on or whatever. There is no singular answer. There is, like, when I was maybe 16 or 17, I remember Georgia had this very anticipated season that came up, and everybody was really eager to see what a program that was kind of perennially at that time forever behind Florida and Tennessee in the East, and if this was going to be the year that they was the program that a lot of people in this state have always thought they should be. And they had a really disappointing season, and it wasn't a real big secret that their quarterback was really enjoying the Athens nightlife and potentially developed a strong recreational drug habit. Okay. Mm-hmm. Like, there is no like, oh man, if you only knew this one thing, everything that happened these first two games is the case. There is no singular issue. I'm not picking on anyone, but like what you just said with Kyle Morlock is probably the best representation of what you've seen through the first two games. There was a stretch, Bud, where, I mean, I'm legitimately talking over 3 practices. Kyle Morlock caught every pass and caught a couple of passes that you didn't think were possible when they left the quarterback's hands. He had a stretch there in practice that was incredible. Always a guy that you realize is, not gonna make the league based off how he crashes in the end or whatever, but a pretty prolific pass catcher who just had one of the more frustrating nights that we've seen in a long time on Monday. That's what's been wrong with this team the first 2 games. A guy that is an incredible player in practice and just didn't have a moment that it transferred. And unfortunately, you've had an awful lot of moments coincide with each other that the play that you've seen in practice, and it's not just practice. I'm not just telling you all, oh, it's such a better team in practice. I mean, look, you've got 2 years of tape of Lawrence Toafili being an incredible receiver out of the backfield, and he dropped a ball in the first quarter, and you didn't see the ball again for another 12 and a half minutes or whatever, in part because of it. It's just a strange blend of a lot of guys with some known production, and both on the field and in the IPF and practice field that has yet to translate over to Saturdays.
In the first 2 games, you played opponents who have a pretty good understanding of what they can do, and they really lean into what they can do and spam the heck out of it. In this Boston College game, I thought Florida State was trying to lean into what it thought it could do, and it just blew up in its face in a bad way. Like, who do they think they could trust? All right, Morlock made a nice catch against Georgia Tech. Got open some, good week of practice, good spring, like coming along. Fall had gone well for him as far as camp goes. A million drops. Toafili, right? Like a guy who in Dublin was one of your more dependable guys, a guy who was like the only playmaker you had 4 years ago when you were playing up there at Clemson when you almost won with Jermaine making that crazy, tackle there. Even like you had really no business winning that game, but yeah, it is weird how it all kind of just fell apart. I don't have a million answers for you guys, and obviously, like neither of us do. I don't know that the staff has like a magic bullet answer here. I do think like there was I believe was it Snow that put out the report that they have had some discussions though as far as the in-game experience and entertainment. And I don't want to like just take this as and like distract from the bigger issues like the on-field stuff. Like we talk a lot of ball on this podcast. I will say, and I shared this with some people at FSU. I've been doing this for 15 years now. The number of people who were, I would say, equally or more pissed off about the in-stadium experience, specifically the music, than the actual result of the game was a little bit shocking to me. Like, I probably got 50 texts.
Mm-hmm.
Like, dude, what the heck happened? Why are they playing like just constant house music? Like, there's no downtime to talk to the guy, like next to me in the seat. It's just like a constant club all the time. Like, this is This is insane.
I wonder if there wasn't, excuse me, I wonder if there wasn't a little bit of an overcompensation because you have the big hole in the stadium. You do have a very limited seating, relatively speaking. You're talking about a building that last year had 74.5 or whatever. That's now 49.5 or 51.5, whatever it is. It was not enjoyable, man. And I know that people said, "Oh, it was the same thing as last year with stand up and shout on third downs and stuff." It wasn't. It was noticeably different than last year. The good news is, look, I think this is, of all the things we'll talk about, probably the easiest thing to fix.
Oh, you think?
And I think it will be fixed. I know that it has landed on a lot of people's radar, and good. That's something that everybody can show linear progression in from week to week. And, it kind of reminds me of the conversations that we have about the helmet, man. Florida State is a relatively young program, but is very much part of the deep fabric of college football. Okay. But having said that, you only have a couple things that are really unique to you. You don't have 120-year history or whatever. You didn't play in the first game, or you're not some, grandfathered member of the SEC or Big Ten or something like that. But nobody has the war chant. Nobody has that type of environment. In fact, teams and the NFL and baseball and the Turkish soccer league and sports teams all over the world have copied that because it's dope as hell. Let's be real careful about, trying to, like, I wouldn't say this is exactly the same, but like the idea that Colorado is supposed to play Shador's song, rap song after he scored or after he throws for a touchdown or whatever. Like, yeah, no, we need to play the fight song. We need to, college football is unique for its own reasons, and not that it is, provides a club-like atmosphere or whatever else. And you do legitimately have one of the elite bands in the country, and lean into that. So I do think that'll change. There is a lot of like moving pieces. I wouldn't even say behind the scenes. It's, the stadium's a construction site. It's very clear that you can see, but also, I can tell you Florida State has a different multimedia rights partner. So that means that a lot of the different in-game components are different, and that, there was probably I don't know the inner workings of that part of it. I'm very familiar with the script from having, had an entity that ran commercials in the stadium last year. I know that part of the in-game structure of music and commercials and breaks and stuff like that. I think it'll change. I know it bothered, you and I talk to each other all the time and tell each other, Twitter's not real life or whatever. Well, that was a real life thing. I mean, that landed in a lot of emails, a lot of text messages, a lot of phone calls. I think you'll see a noticeable difference this weekend against Memphis.
I hope so, and I agree with you. I've heard that they will be changing some stuff up. I kind of left like wondering why they did this, and I think the new partner thing is an interesting component of it. I would comp it a little bit to social media, right? Like at some of these social media teams, like social media in-house for teams, right? People who work there feel the need to like produce social media content.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And sometimes the best social media strategy is less. Okay. Like you will see now when teams get blown out 2-3 years ago, when like, hey, we got to have a Twitter department, we got to have a social media team. And yes, of course, everybody has a social media team. You would see these teams who are getting their butts beat, posting like big time celebration graphics on Twitter, like to make when the score is now 49-7 instead of 49-0.
Right.
Or like, hey, into the second quarter, Miami's beating the Gators 100-0 in the Swamp. Like I took a look, like Florida did not do that when they were losing to Miami. They posted the final score thing, but like there is a bit of like a justify your existence, justify your employment aspect sometimes to some of these like entertainment things. And I will tell you, as somebody who works in media, I also think sometimes it's like the people in executive positions are a little older and they get told like, hey, this is how we reach the youth. Basically.
Right. Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. There's a real problem in college football that young people are not buying season tickets as much because especially like Tallahassee, it's hard, dude. It's hard to get to all these ball games and TVs are better. COVID changed a lot of people's experience because they went out and they souped up their in-home entertainment stuff a lot more. And now it's like really good. And you got to find creative and challenging ways to get people. But I get the long-term concern. In the short term, though, the vast majority of people who are paying any kind of decent money for tickets at all, which this year, obviously, there were a lot of people who were kind of ticked off about, some of the ticket stuff, which understandably, I mean, it changes hard. They're not looking for the in-stadium club experience, let's just say. So maybe a more gradual change to that if we can. Yeah, I mean, dude, I had people in luxury boxes telling me they were trying to figure out how to close the windows.
Yeah.
That won't cut it.
I saw that.
So we'll I hope they fix that.
Yeah, I think it'll change. I think your point, a lot of times, new people in jobs or whatever, they just feel like they need to do something else to make it known that that's what they're doing. And I do think you're right. A lot of bad ideas. And I'm speaking broadly here, not about Florida State, but a lot of ideas in sports and in broader corporate America get green lighted because they get marked as this is a way we can reach the youth.
Hell, I mean, there's been some very popular beer campaigns that probably were not the best idea recently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like keeping it in-house. Florida State put receiver gloves on Martin Luther King Jr. like 7 or 8 years ago now. Like that. Yeah.
I will say, I don't know how any of this played out, but like the idea that the players chose not to have the war chant, I think is I'm very skeptical that is even the players' input isn't asked on a lot of things. I'll put it that way, So like, I don't think that's the case. So
that explanation, if you buy that, no, like Florida State, the people that run Florida State are not complete idiots, and they would basically need to be for that to be a believable explanation, in my opinion. So now what could have happened is, hey, we're going to play more in-stadium music. Let's get some player input on what they would like to hear as far as music in the stadium. So not every song is Phil Collins.
Mm-hmm.
Or 80s hairband, which I get. Like that could have happened. Yeah,
that and look, we can transfer off to something else. We don't need to spend 20 minutes doing this. I'm the one that's prolonging it, but like
this is the biggest thing of the last week, though. Like,
it's more, that's really more like pregame music and stuff. Like but yeah, we're splicing hairs, and like I said, I think there'll be a change there, and one of your strengths, Florida State is the Chiefs, and you'll lean into them and look forward to seeing what the future looks like as far as in-stadium experience. It's a challenging year in general, man. I mean, you're asking your fans to actively enter into what is an active construction site. I mean, it's a challenge in general. A lot of growing pains towards what ultimately will be a very positive thing for Florida State from a revenue generating perspective. And this is always going to be a challenging year. Hopefully otherwise the in-game atmosphere is as enjoyable as it can be.
All right. So before we kind of get to the more macro conversation, from my perspective, quarterback. DJ is not giving you on the field what he's giving you in practice. He is not giving you on the game field what he gave you at Oregon State, or even kind of what you saw at Clemson, right? Now, I know, and I think it's pretty well accepted now, that you don't have as good of a players around here at the skill positions that you had at Oregon State. And that's not you don't have as good of a players as Oregon State usually has. That was just a really good Oregon State crop last year.
Yeah.
I probably should have specified that better in the offseason, to be honest, when we took a lot of flack for saying, like, dude, I don't know. Like, they had, like, 3 skill position guys drafted and like, another one with Texas, a team that's trying to win a national title this year. Like, we'll see. To me, like if you're Florida State, you're trying to win a conference title. You're trying to make the college ball playoff. Pretty unlikely at this point. You are 45-1 to win the ACC currently, but that's not dead last as far as the odds. Actually, you're still ahead of Cal, Pitt, Duke, Virginia, Wake Forest, and Stanford, and tied with BC and
Okay.
Georgia Tech.
Still ahead of Cal. All right. Even after that
Yes.
showing in Eastern Alabama. Good.
Oh, I don't know if you saw that. Yeah, Florida State apparently is not the only program that is allowed or that is immune from upsets. It's Cal did lose as a 14-point favorite, which is larger than FSU's been in either game this year.
Team about 45 minutes outside of Chicago would tell you the same.
That one is bad. But my thought here is, for a variety of reasons, I think you need to start Brock Glenn in this game. But I'm more of like the looking towards the future type person. This is not a conference game. I think you need to see what you have in Brock Glenn. There is some chance, non-zero chance, that he's more of a gamer. Didn't really show you that in Louisville last year in the ACC title game, but at the same time, he also got hurt like pretty quickly into that ball game, and thus you had to run Toe Philly Wildcat. Again, super dependable guy who just gave you a bad game against Boston College, but we've seen him make a lot of good plays before. If it was a conference game, I don't think so. But like coming out of the bye week in a non-conference game, I would like to see Brock start because I think I've seen about enough of DJ. Yeah. Now, I got egg on my face if DJ comes out and balls out and plays more like he plays in some practices. But like DJ in game so far to me is, I don't think I need to see that. But like I don't know. I can certainly be wrong about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're like one of the brightest people that I know, so I'm not trying to be a smart ass, but I don't have a whole lot of need to listen to conference odds at this point. You know, I mean, like I understand the point you're making that yes, this is an out of conference game, but you know, I would say that going 0-3 is just as detrimental as seeing 45-1 turned into nothing to 1 or whatever monumental odds would be after losing yet another game. It's also only in theory, it's really only an arrow you can pull out of your quiver once. If you go to Brock and it doesn't look great, are we talking about starting Luke in 2 weeks or whatever? I mean, I just ultimately coaches will see this, will make a decision at practice. DJ, kind of you can cut and paste what I said 10 minutes ago or so. DJ's had some great moments at practice. But, there's been so many different breakdowns amongst the offense that isn't DJ exclusive by any means, that I would tend to probably have a little bit of a longer leash with DJ. But, look, if the coaching staff, what I will say, I talked to somebody today about this, what they thought the difference would really be. Oh, well, one, you don't know. You can extrapolate what you see at practice, but we've spent 23 minutes and 26 seconds now talking about, what you've seen at practice doesn't necessarily transfer exactly to games. That Brock, particularly, with where DJ is right now, that Brock is probably more likely to tuck it and pick you up 7 to 10 yards on certain plays. And that in and of itself is significant when you're having a hard time, moving the chains and you need an offense to give you a couple sustained drives. That's not something that I'm writing off, but if this was something that I thought if you change the quarterback, all of a sudden this offense is going to score 45 points or something, then yeah, let's do it. But there's there's a lot of other things that I think have to click for it to, really matter as to who's taking your snaps right now.
There's also like real world and real in-building implications of going 0-3 or 0-4, like.
Or going 0-2. Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Two of their top recruits, decommitted this week. Now, granted, I think the one, most of the recruiting media, had been kind of figuring for long before the Georgia Tech game.
Yeah.
But it's a tough one because I do think at some point you're going to need to kind of see what you have in Brock because you will have to make a decision like 425. And I think you'd rather make that decision with some actual game tape on him and like some in-game experience with him running the offense at some point this year. But it may not be this point. They also need DJ to move around a little better than he is for whatever reason. Like I don't know. Again, I don't know. But like, man, he moved better at Oregon State, it looked like, than he's moving so far here. It's almost like he's thinking through it too much. And I don't know that. I mean, I haven't talked to him about it, but it looks like he's kind of swimming a little bit when the game lights go on.
No, definitely. I mean, I don't know if you saw the video that was popular on social media a week ago or whatever with had like a Cranberry song on it or whatever. It was a highlight of his time at Clemson. If people are like, "Oh, look at the throws," or so, no, don't look at the throws, man. Look at the lower half. Look at how he's moving around in the pocket and stuff. That's a different looking dude. So for whatever reason, we'll see. But 0-2 is tough for everybody, man. And I'm sure it's tough for DJ U. And this is not what he had in his head when he came here and etc. But the guy is an absolute veteran, has been through some things in the past. And just from speaking to some of his teammates recently, it's a guy who's very mature and is a good teammate and doesn't, point fingers at other people or whatever. Whatever that matters, it is what it is. And we'll see what it looks like going into game 3. But I'd have a hard time absolutely pulling. We'll see what happens. Yeah. I understand your point. If I thought it was going to be a total turnaround for the offense, and maybe it is, maybe it is just that spark of energy that you need, and ultimately have confidence in the head coach to, if he feels like that's the move that needs to be made, then it'll be made at some point in time.
I tend to agree. I mean, like, he has swapped quarterbacks before. All right, so just going through some of these Patreon questions, we've got a lot. I'm going to read some of these and we kind of have like a macro discussion about the sport, FSU's place in the sport, etc. With so many upsets this weekend, are the only programs that can have great consistency year to year the ones who recruit high school at that elite super level, like Georgia and Ohio State? Do you think Mike knows that he needs to make changes to the recruiting operation? Shouldn't he, after the Georgia game and seeing what those players look like? How do they go from crushing portal evaluations that well to whiffing this bad in this class? Basically, like some stuff like that. So I do think, like, the point of the first question there is, I think probably yes. Right now, you can, I think, be really good year to year. Not really.
What was the first question again? I'm sorry.
It was like, are the only teams that can avoid these wild swings
Georgia, Ohio State? Yeah,
probably so. Honestly, because like you're just the math on it is just so high if you just consistently crush high school recruiting that well, because like you're getting the very, very best and you're keeping the ones that are really working out. Like, yeah, Georgia lets a Jermaine Johnson go once in a while, but like, for every Jermaine Johnson they let go, they keep like 3 or 4 draft picks.
Yeah, and part of letting Jermaine go was that you had the number 1 overall pick at that position. I mean,
right. Exactly.
That's a different situation. Yeah, no, I mean, I think. Look, man, I give pushback sometimes when people totally use NIL and the transfer portal like synonymously. They are 2 different things. Now they're frequently tied together. But this is more portal related, but certainly a lot of portal activity happens because NIL. We won't be naive of that. But I do think that the portal has basically created metaphorical sinkholes in a lot of people's roster. I just don't know. Even Georgia. I mean, Alabama's recruited exceptionally well in high school ranks, and it was 16-21 with 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter or whatever.
They're having to start 2 redshirt freshmen and a true freshman in secondary. If the kid from USF could throw an accurate pass at all, Bama has lost at home, and Notre Dame would be the second biggest upset of the day, losing to NIU, because USF would have beaten Bama in Tuscaloosa. I mean, he misses 5 touchdown passes in that game, and I'm talking like guys who were not covered.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I'll give you an example right here. Bless Harris. That's a guy that I think 3 or 4 years ago, pre-NIL, pre-portal. Now, granted, you got him via the portal, but like if he was on your roster and Byers goes down, he's starting for you. Instead, you get TCU, which has a lot of money and a desperate needed O-line. And they're like, why? Like, and Bless is from Texas. So you can come back to where you're from, pretty much guaranteed starter's job, and make really good money. I think that's a perfect example. Instead, when Byers gets hurt in practice on, was it Friday? I think he got hurt, or whatever day that was. I mean, you're having to run out Rob Scott, who played hard, but is like Byers played well against Georgia Tech, and like was one of the building blocks I know they were very excited about internally. I think that's kind of like one of your points here. It is hard to keep like really good college ready depth. And this is something Kirby Smart has kind of complained about in the offseason as well. And people are like, oh, boo-hoo, Kirby Smart. You just have to get like another robot looking linebacker out there. But it is hard to keep that kind of depth. And I do think that you will see more programs have pretty crazy up and down swings. And I don't know if the 105 is going to change that though. Like, have you thought about that?
I've thought a lot about that, man. I mean, certainly, and I would pay attention to what happened.
Yeah.
I would pay attention to what happened with the House settlement a couple of days ago as well. I mean, that is, well, there are a lot of programs out there that aren't. If that's not up and running, there's a lot of programs I think that will have a challenge next year. That is not. I'm not talking about Florida State. There's a lot of people that have kind of banked into what they thought that would be tied to their broader NIL pool.
No, but let's pull on this thread. This is something I know people in this space beyond just you have been kind of quiet and be like, man, they're spending that house money before this settlement is finished.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the crazy price that the anticipated deals are going to fetch for some of these high schoolers this cycle, right? Like I mean, there are definitely schools out there who flubbed the heck out of, and I'm not talking like, yeah, Florida State had some misevaluations this year. I still think if you bake in the evaluations over this year, but also like the last 2 years, that Florida State's evaluation staff gets really high marks. Okay. Like period. I would still, even with some clear misses this year, and we had said, like, they're not going to go perfect every year. People just don't do that. That's an unsustainable hit rate. And that's something you really can't say because when I said it about Jimbo, people lost their minds. And guess what? Not every single DB turns out to be like Terrence Brooks or PJ Williams. Eventually, you get a Tavares McFadden.
Yeah.
But, like, there were programs that just absolutely missed and just didn't land guys in the portal this year because the money you got to pay for portal kids is right now, whereas they're killing high school recruiting. And the word is like, there's some of this money promised seems to be like maybe house money, from the settlement. And I'm really curious about this, dude, because I've heard this from multiple different schools who are kind of saying like, okay, well, if this doesn't go the way they expected, we'll see if they got the kind of boosters who are going to step up and pay for it because
it'd be a very, very interesting situation.
Extremely. All right, so
the 105 though, no, I mean to get to where you are, that's it's fascinating, man. How many schools are really going to fund that? How many schools are going to? I mean, baseball is an example. What was baseball at 11.3, something like that? I may be off by, maybe it's 11.7. Maybe I'm off a little bit. What are you taking baseball with? 33, 35, something like that? 32 scholarships. I mean, just think about that. Think about the spend associated with that and how dynamically that shifts baseball if I absolutely would expect it, but every program in the SEC West has 32.5 scholarships and half of every other conference is working off a model that has 12 or 15 or something like that.
That's kind of a good little business. Like think about if you ran a minor league team and people had graduated, from like the University of Minnesota AA affiliate, like to have a built-in fan base that has attachment just through the school, like and you're, I mean, they're going to become much more talented if they got that many scholarships. Like college baseball is going to be that's going to be pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. Not probably what people want to hear us pine on about after an 0-2 start, but that's that could be very interesting. I could see college baseball becoming equivalent to a much higher level of minor league baseball than it's ever been before. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's a long-winded way of trying to say that. Yeah, college baseball may be equivalent to, somewhere between AA and AAA baseball within 5 years or something like that. If you're going to be able to stack that many more talented players and with some of the, money that certain programs are aggressively pouring into college baseball. So anyway.
All right. So I'll take a couple of these because a couple of you are aimed at me and I deserve the criticism. So how did they whiff this bad in this class they crushed before? I don't think they whiffed on every single kid.
I think look, just in general, 2 games is tough because you always think you've seen enough to make a full judgment on what the season's going to look like or what this player is going to look like or whatever else. I mean, I understand. I don't want to interrupt what you're saying, but I mean,
no.
Think about how many players last year, wasn't like Braden Fisk was bad or anything, but Braden Fisk against LSU was not the same player that was playing against Louisville at the end of the year. And that's probably not a great example, as I don't know that we're going to have a bunch of dudes that, grow into second-round picks or something like that. But I just think it's a little early to write off. You can acknowledge, yes, this group of 16 players in the portal or whatever doesn't look like it's, similar to what was brought in the past. If that's something you want to say after 2 games, that's fine. But we'll give a little bit of pushback or like sweeping generalizations after 2 games. Right.
So I wrote down some things here. I'll just cross them off my list. 1, market factors. And by that, I mean more teams, more players in the market this year, right? People saw how quick of a turnaround was achieved by FSU and by some of these other programs with the transfer portal. And I think they were more ready to pounce than they had previously been. So there was certainly more competition in the space for portal players. Florida State, I mean, I know you know what this is, but like, do people at home understand what first mover advantage is? If you're first mover advantage, like you can in some spaces, you can build a lead where you're just never caught, especially like certain things with patents, like they have a certain, like a long shelf life patent type stuff. If you're first to market, man, Florida State and Ole Miss and maybe 1 or 2 other programs had some pretty serious first mover advantage in terms of portal, right? Now, I know you and I have had like good nature arguments, like, can you actually win a national title portaling? But like, there's no doubt that you can build a really damn good team doing so. And they did build a really damn good team. I do think that it's harder to do now because so many more teams are involved in the portal. Like, look at TCU going and getting Bless Harris, for an example like that. Like, that's a guy that just logically you can't keep on your roster as a backup if he's got 1 year left to play, wants to play, and is going to make starters money at a very rich private school. Got it. So that was 1 right there. 2, a lot of people have been like, hey, why are they idiots? Why are they trying to go all in? They should have just done a rebuilding year. I will push back on that a little bit. Number 1, I am not backing down from my thought that I think felt internal pressure, and they can disagree with me. That's fine. Like, that's, we're not going to agree on everything, but I do think they felt some internal pressure to try to make it back to the playoff for 2 reasons. 1, this is Florida State. And so if you think you're there, you kind of need to be like to make the playoff, you kind of need to be like a top 11-ish team. Well, that's a good goal for this program on an annual basis. Number 2, I do think this is where the snub hurts you. I think getting snubbed makes it less acceptable to drop back a year and be like, okay, that was awesome. Had a lot of special players. Those guys are gone now. We're going to kind of, regroup a little bit, more of a consolidation of gains type of year. However, the only pushback I'll have on this is, one, they're not complete idiots over there, guys. I don't think any person in that program believed that they could win a national title this year, right? I do think that they thought if things went well with the portal that they could make a run at the playoff, which I do believe was their goal. But I don't think that should be confused with like hey, they thought they're a couple pieces away from winning a national title. Nobody in this program, at least not that I saw it. Nobody said it publicly, I assume, right? And nobody privately told me like, yeah, if DJ clicks, they can win a national title. That was just not said, not to me. And I'm guessing not to you. But like, so in terms of figuring out what their evaluation is and the amount by which they missed, and they missed someone on some of these guys, not all of them, clearly. Like Richie Leonard's a hit. A couple of these other guys that I think do have some decent futures. But I will point out,
Richie Leonard's played very well for you.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Florida fans who are like, "Oh, we upgrade on Richie Leonard." No, you didn't, and that was pretty clear from the start. Also, I think Arkansas upgraded by losing those guys to UF too. If you watch that game, they put up almost 700 yards at Oklahoma State last weekend. They just had some of the most. That's got to be the most frustrating loss I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see Connolly's stat?
No.
It was like 80% of the plays so far this year that have flipped a win probability, more than 15%, occurred in that game.
We're in that game.
In that game.
No,
I mean, we're like a couple thousand plays in so far to the season.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're an Arkansas fan, you are just your quarterback plays like Vince Young, and then you turn it over 4 times in the second half and commit like 11 penalties. And anyway, the difference this year is that I do think they tried to thread the needle between making a playoff run, but also getting more multi-year guys at a lot of these spots. Ferguson is a multi-year. Jalen Brown is a guy that will have 3 or 4 years.
Tomo Adurje.
Right. The linebacker from Alabama. Did they misread the readiness of some of these players? I think it's clearly fair to say they did in some cases. But it wasn't like they should have first guessed, knew that those guys weren't ready to roll for you. I mean, if you've done a pretty good job evaluating, you liked your initial evaluation on some of these guys out of high school. They go to an elite program. The practice film in some cases is good. In some cases, I'm like, I don't know. We'll see. Right. But I'm sure they talked to some guys who are at those programs and, got their opinion on what they think. Benson's a 1-year guy. Like, look, Benson's not anything special. And like the Bama people who were like, he was not going to play here if he stayed. They're right. But he's still your starter, which says a hell of a lot about what you got in his room right now. So you didn't need him. Like, that's not a bad take, in my opinion. And the receiver quality this year in the portal was hot garbage. Like, it's not like, hey, they should have gotten this guy instead of that guy. I don't know who the hell you wanted to go get a receiver. Like, Colby Young wasn't going to come here. So
it's partially, in my opinion, has had an impact on the NIL market is the belief and realization that the availability of additional positions other than tackle and quarterback may not be there. I'll put it that way. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Totally. I mean, it's, like you look at this, look at NC State. They went and they paid up big money for the Rogers kid off Ohio State's roster. He's a year 1-0, just like Jalen Brown was. Year 1-0 as a fantasy football term basically means like 4 or 5-star freshman receiver who doesn't see the field. Historically, those guys bust at an astronomical rate. If you don't get on the field and ball as a freshman, there's some unique cases though, right? Ohio State and LSU, I think last year would have been the 2 most unique spots to pull guys off because think about it. Every single guy who started for those teams last year got drafted like crazy, So NC State, I think, took a pretty informed shot. I like the shot that LSU took on Jalen Brown. He's already been in games and made some catches for you. I think he actually has a chance to be a decent player for you. So I don't hate all these portal takes. The portal takes are not the entire reason why they're 0-2. I do have some of the leadership concerns from at the player level. I don't think you have great player leadership on this team compared to the last 2 years. Probably not realistic to think you would. Not every single year is going to have special leaders step up. I also don't know if the other area I think the snub hurts you is confirmation bias. The process that you had led to 13-0. and one of the best teams you've had since the national title team. It's hard in the moment when your players are hurting and like the program's pretty shell shocked to be like, all right, we got to make changes. Now, granted, that's what Norvell's paid to do, but the timing of it was really, really tough on them. I think more like it's not like the lingering effect of like, oh yeah, they're still really butthurt about the snub. No, that's not it. It's some of like the logistical and timing factors of it. I think were really tough. Just because your process yielded 13-0 did not mean the process was flawless. And I do wonder if there will be some changes. I think logically, anytime you're a proud program like the Noles and you start 0-2 and staring down probably a couple more of those, not necessarily like huge upsets, but more losses this season. It'll be on Norvell to look at the staff. Like, do we have the right balance of recruiters and coaches? That's the question I would be asking myself if I'm him, which kind of relates to this next question here, which is basically like, well, one is why can Florida keep its recruits and FSU cannot? I would say a couple of those kids committed to Florida are legacies who I think would go there regardless of that, honestly. I got to overhear a conversation this summer that I was not involved in, but I was shooting video at a recruiting event, and it involved a pretty highly rated kid. And he got told by one of the reporters, like, hey, their win total's 4.5, meaning Florida. And the dad was with him. He's like, don't care. Go in there. So if you want some intel on that, and this is a guy Florida State was recruiting, by the way, but like, it's kind of one of the things I just never really bought into as far as them getting this player. But like, that's one of the things. If you have some serious legacies, you've had kids from Madison County who would go to Florida State if Florida State was 0-12. Like, it just like 0-12, death penalty probation doesn't matter. Okay. Like they feel like that is their mission from God to go there. And with legacies, sometimes that happens. But my opinion on Florida State's staff as recruiters, sales, relentlessness, energy, relationships is unchanged now as it was when they were 13-0, as it was when they were 10-3, as it was when they were 5-7. Which again is why we talked about on the show before. Like, do you have the right mix of coaching and recruiting? I think I got this wrong. I think like I believed that they're not great recruiters. Okay. I mean, I saw the article this week that, said that obviously, do a great job at Battle's End. Somewhere between like 6 and 12, I think it was, as far as like, I mean, that's a hell of a fundraising job, man. Congrats on that. Like, I know people want to give you a bunch of shit on Twitter, but that's a good job. Like, this staff from a recruiting standpoint is not in the 6 to 12 range nationally. Now, I thought that doesn't mean that they're not a good staff. I thought that there were some other elements of this staff, and so I think where I misevaluated. Like, if people are going to give me shit stuff, I should probably say, yeah, I think I was wrong on this. I thought like keeping the culture together and continuity may be enough to keep the floor really high, and clearly it was not. Right. So if you're Mike, that's something he'll have to take a look at probably. He's probably already mentally doing it, but like in the off season, hey man, how did this go wrong? Like, how are we not remaining a super high floor operation? And part of it is probably thinking back to that Georgia game. Do our players look like their players? Do I need to get a couple more guys in here, or any guys who are just stone cold killers on the trail? So I think I got it wrong. I think I bought into the continuity and just the like ball coaching ability, and maybe got away a little bit from the belief in the all importance of talent acquisition.
Yeah, I mean, long season still left to be had. A lot of things to be determined, and you'll just have to, figure out. I'm hesitant to have like the evaluation conversation because, yeah, let's say this portal window was totally different than anyone you've ever had.
Yeah,
doesn't mean that you lose to Boston College at home. I mean, those two things aren't related. It doesn't mean, and I'm not trying to deflect. I'm not trying to say anything else, but it's a different conversation. If you didn't hit your evaluations this year, then that's a conversation that we more have after like Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame, North Carolina, Florida, whatever that class of games. That's more like and first of all, I would not classify Florida State as having gone all in this year. I wouldn't. Now, did they do more portal activity than, maybe some would have expected? Sure. But it's kind of a different conversation, so we'll see, man. It's certainly not the season that anybody wanted, and I understand people's frustration, and I understand that Twitter mentions aren't going to be a beautiful thing when you start 0-2, and that's just that's the job. I'm very fortunate to have the job that I've had, and had a lot of incredible memories and a lot of incredible experiences, and people get frustrated with you. That's, fortunately, I've done this podcast with you for 15 years, and I'm not comparing the two things at all. But when you do a large podcast that gets, 10, 20, 30,000 listens an episode, people are going to tell you that they don't think you're right about everything. People are going to tell you that you're stupid with how you process information. People are going to tell you they don't like your voice or whatever, so to that extent, maybe I'm fortunate to have done this podcast with you for as long as I have. And I'm not going to say that it's a great experience to have a lot of people upset with you or how they, interpret the entity that you're associated with or the performance that you've had with it. But, it is what it is. And we'll keep focusing on what we need to focus on and move from there. But yeah.
You do want it though, because
it's what makes everything possible, yes, man. I mean,
you need passion. Like when we screw up something on Cover 3,
yeah.
First of all, I'm pissed, right? Like today, we didn't have a graphic loaded that I submitted yesterday, and I was like, I kept talking. I wasn't even looking at the screen. I kind of had it memorized, and I looked at the screen to see something I memorized. Like, the graphic up. But when people criticize us, and I'm like, cool. You guys care a lot about your team. If we get something wrong about your team, that's good. What you don't want is the apathy, right? That's what.
No, you want the passion. You can't sit here and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so surprised about the passion." The passion is what makes this podcast possible. The passion is what makes 247 having a great, 2 different podcasts within their own umbrella. Passion is what let War Chant have 12 employees or whatever they've got at this point. It's what lets a podcast like ours be voted the best college sports podcast in the world 2 years ago or whatever. It's what the passion is what makes the Battles End the largest collective in the country from a per member standpoint. You can't have that and then be upset when there's passion. Okay. It is what it is. We work in a highly passionate, motivated fan base. Doesn't come as a surprise to me. I'll put it that way. So
completely. All right. Other Patreon questions. Do you think they'll get it turned around against Memphis? Man, I'm a little scared to say because they have had better practices at times and then gone out, and that has not translated to the game. And typically, I would say Norvell's teams, for the most part, have, trying to think back over the years, generally played how they practiced. And that includes the Boston College game. The last 2 practices of the week, I think they would admit were not great. And Norvell talked about it. So, we're not state secrets here. He talked about it in a press conference. But I don't think they practiced terribly leading up to Georgia Tech, right? And that was...
No, I think by all accounts, leading up to Tech was pretty good.
Yeah. They usually judge this team internally pretty well. And they'll shoot you straight about it. When they were bad internally, they would tell you, in terms of the year 1, year 2, I don't know, man. This is going to be a struggle. We're not there. One of the things I'm annoyed with myself is, whiffing on this team, because I feel like we really got a lot of these opponents correct. Cal's kind of decent. Georgia Tech just lost to Syracuse. They're sort of in that 30 to 50 range. SMU, we were very skeptical on. BYU pushed them around all night, and SMU's gonna have to fight to make a bowl. Duke can barely throw a forward pass. So, North Carolina basically got that right. I think Notre Dame kind of nailed, and I did not nail that we were going to lose at Northern Illinois. Don't get that wrong. Florida. So I guess my point is you're struggling. Which of these teams which of these teams are about to play down this stretch feels better about themselves than they did to start the season? Cal does. SMU no. Clemson no. I mean, they hung 1 million points on Appalachian State, but that's still not they're losing to Georgia and being non-competitive still says something too. Although a lot of people do that. Duke probably about neutral. I guess they luck boxed their way into that double overtime win. Right, Northwestern, Miami, yes. Carolina, no, and lost their quarterback already. Notre Dame, gonna guess no. The A&M win doesn't last all that long. Charleston Southern, not really keeping up with them until game week. Apologies. And Florida, probably not. They played Lagway in the Swamp and didn't cover against Sanford, by the way. So it was a 38.5-point line. So for perspective there, Sanford this year is not quite as good as like the Sanford FSU played a couple years ago. Remember that one? Was it Ducky Hodges?
Oh, dog. I was in Montana at the time, and I was watching the game, and I could get like every fourth play to load and watch. And I called you the next morning, and that was a frustrating one. But no, I mean, you said you were annoyed that the schedule was right. I'm annoyed that we're 56 minutes in and we've done one ad read, so that's on me. Apologies. Want to thank our good friend Matt Lewis, GrudyHR.com. Fantastic option for all Noles, and an option that many Noles have been choosing recently as a method to optimize your business. So whether it be HR, payroll, onboarding, or a litany of other things that Matt can help you streamline your business with, would encourage you to reach out to him. And Bud is somebody that's worked with our good friend Chad twice now. I will let you speak of the team over there.
Man, Chad does such an awesome job. 580, I think it is, Nolecast loans now. 844 FSU loan is the number to call. Also, just hit the link right there. If you're listening to us on your phone, it's right there in the show notes. If you prefer the website option, just click the link. Pretty easy. So great rates, great customer service, honest experience. Love dealing with Chad. Always shoots us straight. You want to talk about a guy that is passionate. I mean, and I mean this as a comment. Like, Chad will send 70 or 80 group text messages in a half, for sure. Like he wants to know what's going on. He wants to know if it's going to get fixed right this second. And I'm like, dude, they don't have it tonight. Like he's struggling with the rest of us, for sure. And if you want somebody who talk a little Knowles when you give him a call as well, he most certainly will. But he will hustle for you as well. I know he's been putting up some huge numbers. So 844 FSU loan is the number to call. Give Chad a shout. And does a great job, man. I've used him twice personally. Could not have had a better experience. So, all right. Let me see what else we have here. Not a ton. In some ways, it was nice to like not play a game this weekend. And also, can we point out like how nonsense? Like, yeah, okay. So you have 2 embarrassing upset losses. Got it. Cool. Most people know this now. It's documented. Do they all have to be island games? Like they got to be the only thing on TV? Like you're going to play 2 island games before the NFL season starts and lose both of them as like 10 or 11 point favorites for like that's what we're doing. The timing of that just like now it's all on you. You got to play better. But the timing of that sucks, man. Right?
I agree. Yeah, the Georgia Tech one I can kind of not understand, not dismiss. It's the Boston College one's troubling. But yeah, that's the old Monday night game. You're back more in a routine at this point, playing on Saturday, having traditional, the days that they associate when they talk to you about practice are back in order. And yeah, man, hopefully you have a team comes out Saturday afternoon, Saturday, at noon, gets a win, gets, it's not as though all that concerns ourselves and this fan base will be right in the world if you do win, but it'll certainly be a first step in the right direction. And let's hope that we're having a conversation next week about a 1-2 team. But we will have like I said, we'll have a Memphis specific preview and some other content for you later on in this week as well.
All right, buddy. Enjoy it.